Part 1. What do you truly believe is the opposite of love? Many will instinctively answer hate. Others might consider apathy or indifference, suggesting a complete lack of feeling. A few might even propose control or death as love's antithesis. But if we observe more deeply, none of these truly stand as love's adversary. Hate, for instance, isn't love's enemy. It's more like a distorted shadow, a mask trembling with unresolved emotion. Hate cannot exist in isolation. It always leans on something more profound, something deeper seated within the human psyche. And if you trace its roots far enough, you invariably arrive at fear. Consider the individual who boasts in cruelty, seemingly strong, commanding, even feared by those around them. Yet beneath this outward posture often lies a profound terror, the fear of being powerless, of being perceived as unworthy, of ultimately being nothing at all. Or take jealousy, which feels sharp, bitter, and consuming. At its very core, jealousy is nothing more than the fear of not being enough, the anxiety of abandonment, and the profound fear of being overlooked or unseen. This isn't just an individual experience. Societies often exhibit collective jealousies towards other nations' prosperity, leading to protectionist policies or even trade wars, all stemming from a fear of losing economic standing or influence. Arrogance, too, appears as confidence, sounding like absolute certainty. But arrogance is merely an endless attempt to cover a hidden wound, a deeply ingrained insecurity. The arrogant person feels a constant need to prove themselves, driven by a profound terror of being small or insignificant. Their pride becomes a carefully constructed mask, designed to conceal the fear of being invisible, of fading into the background. In international relations, this often translates into rigid diplomatic stances or an unwillingness to compromise, where national pride, driven by historical grievances or a fear of perceived weakness, overrides pragmatic solutions. Even the ignorant person who insists on always being right, who argues endlessly and refuses to listen, outwardly projects an image of strength, even certainty. But a closer look reveals fear driving the entire show. It's the fear of being wrong, the dread of being exposed, the anxiety that if their cherished ideas collapse, their very sense of self might collapse with them. This rigidity in belief systems, observed in various social and political movements, often finds its foundation in a collective fear of uncertainty or the perceived loss of traditional values. When people cling fiercely to their narratives, even in the face of contradictory evidence, it's often an unconscious defense mechanism against the destabilizing force of new information. Therefore, to truly comprehend the root of much suffering and what we perceive as evil in the world, we must look beyond hate, cruelty, or arrogance themselves. Instead, we must uncover the underlying cause that gives them life. And that ultimate root is fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of death, or even the fear of the unknown. If you could somehow completely remove this fundamental fear, the entire elaborate structure of human suffering, both individual and collective, would inevitably crumble. Observing human behavior closely reveals just how much of it is quietly, often unconsciously, driven by the ego. The ego is that fragile mental image we construct of ourselves, the story of who we believe we are, what we possess, what others think of us, and our perceived place in the social hierarchy. The ego is perpetually afraid because, deep down, it instinctively knows it is only a narrative, a temporary mask, a compilation of memories and labels that could be stripped away in an instant. This inherent vulnerability explains why people cling to possessions, not primarily because the objects themselves hold intrinsic value, but because losing them feels akin to losing a piece of their very identity. The consumer economy, in many ways, thrives on this egoic fear, convincing us that acquiring more will make us more secure, more complete, or more acceptable. Similarly, individuals chase recognition and status, not solely for the joy these bring, but because the ego cannot bear to be unseen, unacknowledged, or considered insignificant. This desperate need for validation often fuels intense competition in workplaces, academic institutions, and even social media, where the fear of irrelevance can be a powerful motivator. This is precisely why human beings sometimes lash out, grasp, dominate, and defend, not because they are inherently evil, but because their fragile ego is terrified of disappearing, of being diminished. Nations, too, often engage in geopolitical maneuvers, military buildups, and economic protectionism driven by a collective ego. A national identity constructed from historical narratives and aspirations, perpetually afraid of losing its global standing, its economic might, or its perceived dominance. When you begin to grasp this underlying dynamic, you naturally stop taking people's behavior so personally. You start to understand that the cruelty, the stubbornness, the arrogance, or the greed you encounter are often desperate attempts to protect a fragile sense of self, both individually and collectively. Suddenly, instead of perceiving an enemy, you begin to see a frightened child hiding behind a mask, or a nation acting out of deep-seated historical insecurities. This shift in perspective can be profoundly liberating, fostering empathy rather than reactive judgment. If you are honest enough to look inwardly at yourself, you will undoubtedly recognize that you have engaged in the very same behaviors. We have all, at various points, lied, defended, attacked, or withdrawn. Not out of love, but out of fear that our own ego might shatter, that our carefully constructed self-image might crack. And when you recognize this same fundamental fear, alive and trembling within your own chest, the walls of separation begin to dissolve. You can no longer despise others for their fear-driven actions, because you identify the exact same trembling vulnerability within your own being. This shared human experience fosters a profound sense of connection. This realization then prompts a deeper, more fundamental question. What exactly is this pervasive fear that haunts the ego? For most of what we label as fear has very little to do with what is actually happening in the present moment. It is almost always about tomorrow, about things that haven't yet arrived, or events that exist solely in our imagination. We are, quite remarkably, ingenious at fabricating a whole museum of future anxieties. The fear of losing our job, the fear of losing our physical attractiveness, the fear of not being quite as clever or successful as the next person, and of course that ancient, ubiquitous favorite, the fear of death. These individual anxieties, when aggregated, can create widespread economic uncertainty, leading to cautious spending habits or investment decisions that impact entire markets. The fear of job loss, for instance, can depress consumer demand, even in times of economic growth, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of instability. The strange paradox is this: the harder we strive to feel secure, to control every variable, the more anxious and insecure we often become. It's akin to trying to hold on to water with a clenched fist. The tighter the grip, the faster it slips through your fingers. This principle extends to national security as well. The more resources nations pour into building impenetrable defenses, the more they can become paranoid about external threats, creating an arms race fueled by mutual fear rather than genuine safety. Let's delve a little deeper into the true origin of all this fear. Because fear, you see, is inextricably linked to attachment. The moment you cling to something, a person, a position, a possession, or even an idea, you simultaneously begin to worry that it might slip away, that it might be lost. You fall deeply in love, and immediately, packaged within that very same experience, comes the fear of loss. She might leave you, he might betray you, or someone more captivating might appear. It's an inherent part of the deal. Yet if you pause for a moment, you can realize that you were perfectly complete and perfectly all right before this person arrived. You lived, you breathed, you laughed, and you will do so again. The same logic applies to our endless parade of what-ifs. What if I lose my job? What if the stock market collapses? What if I make a fool of myself in public? 1,000 worries march one after the other, an imagined army of potential disasters, and yet, the vast majority of them never actually come to pass. Yesterday, you carried a similar burden of anxieties, and yet here you are, still in one piece, still navigating the present moment. This constant projection into a feared future, whether personal or collective, drains our energy and prevents us from engaging fully with the present. For instance, the constant economic forecasts predicting doom and gloom can lead businesses to hoard capital and individuals to delay investments, slowing down economic activity that might otherwise flourish. Human beings, after all, are astonishingly adaptable. We can thrive in deserts, dense jungles, or frozen polar regions. We possess an incredible capacity to adjust to almost anything life throws our way. So, the curious truth is that fear isn't truly about external events themselves. Instead, it's about our deep-seated resistance to change, our desperate, often unconscious, hope that life should remain exactly as it is, static and predictable. And that, fundamentally, is the one thing life never does. Life is an ever-flowing river, a constant state of flux and transformation. Our fear often arises from trying to stand still in that current. Now, of course, the grandest fear of all is that something utterly catastrophic will happen. The world will fall apart, society will collapse, the sky itself will come tumbling down. People have been prophesying such cataclysms for thousands of years, and one day, they will undoubtedly be proven right. But let's truly consider this ultimate scenario. Suppose the world really does end tomorrow. Where exactly will you be? You won't be sitting alone on some desolate rock, watching everything go up in smoke while you're left to sweep up the mess. No, you will be ending right along with it, curtain down, lights out, and no one left in the audience to complain about the show. The idea of a global catastrophe frightens us primarily because we imagine we'll be somehow left out of it, abandoned by existence itself, enduring the horror alone. But life has never operated that way. You arrived with life. You have been carried along with its flow since your very first breath. And when it goes, you go too. The real ending that haunts us isn't the end of the world at all, but the end of our small, personal mental stage, that incessant, busy chatterbox we call the mind. For the mind is terribly afraid of being seen through, of its illusions being exposed. Because when pure awareness shines brightly, The mind's tricks, its narratives, and its carefully constructed dramas dissolve. And to the ego, that feels precisely like death. Part 2. But the profound irony is this. When the mind falls silent, when its endless chatter ceases, it isn't your end at all. It's akin to waking from a vivid dream that you mistook for reality, only to find yourself perfectly safe in your own bed the entire time. The perceived death of the ego is, in fact, a liberation, a return to a more fundamental and expansive state of being. Here's a peculiar psychological game we unconsciously play with ourselves, and it has everything to do with words. For the word itself is never the actual thing. You can utter the word fire 1,000 times, yet you will never get burned. You can repeat the word water until your tongue dries out, but it will never quench your thirst. And yet, say the word fear, and something almost immediately shivers in your belly, a subtle tightening in the chest, as though the sound itself carries the very ghost of the emotion along with it. Curious, isn't it? This immediate visceral reaction to a word highlights the deep conditioning of our minds and the power language holds over our experience. Imagine you feel that familiar tightening in the chest, that slight quiver in your nerves. If you leave it simply unnamed, unlabeled, it's just a sensation, a ripple of energy passing through your body, no more inherently alarming than a gentle breeze. But the moment you mentally declare, this is fear, you have instantly spun an entire drama around it. Suddenly, it's not merely a tingle. It transforms into the fear of failure, or the fear of rejection, or the fear of tomorrow's uncertainties. You see, we live immersed in a world of symbols, words, labels, and descriptions, and far too often, we confuse these linguistic constructs for the raw reality itself. The map, as the ancient wisdom goes, is not the territory. So the fundamental question arises, can you feel a sensation without immediately naming it? Can you allow the body to tremble a little or the heart to flutter without immediately constructing a story about it, without immediately framing it within the narrative of fear? For in that very pause, in that space between sensation and label, lies a profound secret. Without the word, without the conceptual framework, the amorphous feeling we call fear collapses back into pure sensation, nothing more than a temporary ripple in the stream of your awareness. And then you discover a delightful, liberating truth. Fear was never a solid, tangible thing to begin with. It was only a word chasing its own tail, a concept giving substance to a fleeting energy. This understanding can fundamentally alter our relationship with anxiety and apprehension. Now, you may also notice that the harder you struggle with fear, the more fiercely it seems to grow, the more entrenched it becomes. It's rather like trying to push away quicksand. The more you resist, the deeper you sink. And all the while, this restless mind of ours is whispering incessantly, do something about it, fix it, fight it, figure it out. A constant internal directive to control the uncontrollable. But what happens if you don't heed that voice? What if, instead of resisting or trying to intellectualize it, you simply observe it? Imagine watching it as though it were a bird singing outside your window. You don't rush out to correct the bird's song. You just hear it. You allow it to be. The mind, however, does not like this one bit, because fear is its favorite mask, its most compelling performance. The mind itself is, in essence, hollow, nothing but echoes, memories, and incessant chatter. And so, it desperately clings to fear for a sense of substance, for a role to play. For if you were ever to truly see through the trick, if you were to catch the magician with his sleeves rolled up, the entire elaborate show of egoic drama would collapse. This collective mental clinging to fear can also be observed in societal anxieties that are amplified by media narratives, creating a perpetual sense of crisis that fuels public demand for intervention, often to the benefit of specific political or economic interests. Of course, there is a kind of fear that makes perfect practical sense. If you are walking along the edge of a cliff and feel your knees tremble, that's simply the body's innate intelligence saying, "Watch your step, old chap." When you inadvertently place your hand too close to a blazing fire, it tingles, and you instinctively draw it back. That isn't neurosis or psychological baggage. That is pure biological intelligence. A survival mechanism honed over millions of years of evolution. This immediate physical fear is essential and serves a vital purpose. But the curious and often detrimental thing is how we take that useful, momentary flicker of biological caution and spin it out into endless, complex, psychological dramas. You feel a flutter in your stomach, perhaps from a slight physiological shift, and instead of simply leaving it alone, the mind immediately rushes in with its relentless commentary. This is fear. What if I fail? What if she leaves me? What if tomorrow brings financial ruin or social embarrassment? And the poor body, which only intended to give you a gentle, useful nudge in the present moment, now finds itself dragged onto a vast mental stage where the anxiety-ridden play never truly ends. So you see there's a vast, crucial difference between the fear that belongs to the organism, the body's innate protective mechanism, and the fear that belongs solely to the imagination, the mind's endless narratives. One lasts a moment, serves its purpose, and then passes. It keeps you safe. The other breeds elaborate stories, constructs entire identities around anxiety, and builds whole civilizations of worry, preventing us from truly living. This distinction is crucial for understanding how societies react to perceived threats. A pragmatic biological fear might lead to sensible precautions, while an imaginative psychological fear can lead to overreactions, xenophobia, or the erosion of civil liberties in the name of security. And isn't it ironic? The biological kind of fear usually keeps you alive, prompting immediate, appropriate action, while the psychological sort often prevents you from truly living, keeping you trapped in a cycle of apprehension and inaction. The body intrinsically knows what to do. Step back from the edge. Take your hand out of the fire. Simple, direct, effective. But the mind, it invents 1,000 edges, 1,000 fires, most of them entirely imaginary, existing only in its own mental constructs. And then we spend our lives running about as though chased by ghosts of our own invention, exhausting ourselves in a battle against phantoms. The profound joke is that there was never anything substantial there to begin with. Psychological fear is like trying to bite your own teeth or chase your own shadow. You can make quite a performance of it, but in the end, there is simply nothing tangible to catch. The ego, you see, is perpetually afraid because its fundamental mode of operation is to control. It constantly seeks to manage, predict, and dictate every aspect of existence, both internal and external. And from this deep-seated, often desperate urge to control comes an endless stream of fears. Fear that people won't behave as we expect them to. Fear that tomorrow won't conform to our meticulously crafted plans, fear that the world, in its unpredictable grandeur, might slip entirely out of our grasp. This individual urge to control mirrors the geopolitical desire for hegemony, where nations fear losing control over resources, trade routes, or ideological influence, leading to proxy conflicts and strategic rivalries. But life never truly bends to such demands. It flows like a mighty river, boundless and ever-changing. And the harder you try to dam it up, to force it into your preconceived channels, the more turbulent and chaotic it becomes. The secret, then, is not to fight the current, but to surrender to it. It's about learning to trust that the river of life carries you, just as it always has, from your very first breath to your last. And when you lean into that natural, effortless flow, when you cease the internal struggle, fear begins to dissolve. Not because you've conquered it, but because you realize there is nothing to hold on to, and fundamentally, nothing that truly needs holding. To truly trust the current of life is to recognize that nothing is ever truly out of place. Even the unexpected twists, the sudden falls, the seeming detours, they all belong, fitting perfectly into the larger, intricate tapestry of existence. Everything arrives at the right time, in the right way, for its own purpose. Fear says, "I'm not ready. I might lose. I might fail." But the deeper truth reveals that you are already exactly where you need to be, perfectly equipped for this present moment. And in that profound surrender, in that radical acceptance of what is, love becomes truly possible. For love is not control, and it is most certainly not possession. Love is the willingness to float, to let life carry you, without demanding that it obey your maps, your plans, or your limited expectations. So, you truly need not fear. The very same cosmic power that spins the galaxies into being, that orchestrates the magnificent dance of the tides, is carrying you too. The great, unending dance of existence has never, for a single moment, forgotten you. And then, in this clarity, you see that there was never an enemy at all, never a force truly working against you. Only life, forever moving you along, guiding you through its intricate patterns. Trust that this very moment holds everything it needs, and that the current of life is infinitely wiser and more compassionate than your most elaborate plans. And when you finally understand this, when this truth settles deep within your being, you can at last rest in what is. You discover, with a liberating sigh, that there was never anything chasing you at all, only life, forever holding you, forever guiding you, forever flowing on, an eternal, benevolent presence.